Rachel Morgan stared at her screen in horror. Her trembling finger hovered over the mouse, desperately willing the unsend option to appear in her email client, but the little whooshing animation had already confirmed her worst nightmare. She had just sent her $47,000 medical bill, instead of the quarterly financial report to Marcus Donovan, the notoriously demanding CEO of Pinnacle Investments. The same Marcus Donovan who had been requesting this report for weeks. The same Marcus Donovan who had fired 2 department heads last month for incompetence, and the same Marcus Donovan who held Rachel's future at the company in his hands. "No, no, no," Rachel whispered, her face flushing hot with embarrassment as she frantically clicked through her sent items folder. The timestamp mocked her, sent 3 minutes ago. Too late to recall, too late to fix. She slumped back in her chair, the steady beeping of the hospital monitors in her memory, suddenly drowning out the ambient office noise around her. It had been 6 months since the accident. 6 months of surgeries, physical therapy, and mounting medical bills that her insurance only partially covered. 6 months of working remotely while recovering, desperate to prove she could still perform her duties as financial analysis director. And now, in one careless moment, she had not only failed to deliver the crucial report, but had inadvertently shared her most private struggle with the company's most intimidating figure. Her phone buzzed, and she jumped. It was Alicia from the adjacent cubicle. "Donovan's assistant just walked in looking for you. Everything okay?" Rachel's stomach lurched. She quickly typed back, "Tell her I'm on a call. I'll be there in 5. She needed those 5 minutes to compose herself, to come up with some explanation that wouldn't end with her cleaning out her desk by lunchtime. Her computer pinged with a new email notification. From Marcus Donovan. Subject line, "Your attachment." Rachel's finger trembled as she clicked to open it. "My office now." 2 words. Not even a proper sentence. Rachel grabbed her tablet with the actual report saved on it and straightened her blazer. The walk to the executive floor felt like a march to the gallows. Every step on the polished marble floor echoed her racing heartbeat. Employees glanced up from their desks as she passed, perhaps sensing her distress or simply curious about her summons to the executive suite. Marcus Donovan's assistant, Patricia, a steely-eyed woman in her 50s with impeccable silver hair, looked up from her desk as Rachel approached. "She's expecting you," she said, her expression revealing nothing as she buzzed Rachel through. The CEO's corner office was intimidating by design. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Boston skyline, making visitors feel as though they were suspended in mid-air. Minimalist furniture in chrome and black leather created a stark, uncompromising atmosphere. And behind the massive desk sat Marcus Donovan himself, his back to the door as he gazed out at the city below. He didn't turn when she entered. "Close the door, Ms. Morgan," Rachel complied, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Mr. Donovan, I can explain—" "Sit." He swiveled around finally, his expression unreadable. At 45, Marcus Donovan had the reputation of being brilliant but ruthless. His salt-and-pepper hair and tailored suits projected authority, while his piercing blue eyes seemed to cut through pretense. Those eyes were now fixed on Rachel with unsettling intensity. On his desk, printed out in crisp detail, was her medical bill. Every charge, every procedure, every medication from the night a drunk driver had T-boned her car at an intersection, leaving her with a shattered pelvis, broken ribs, and internal bleeding that had nearly killed her. "I apologize for the mix-up," Rachel said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I have the actual report here. It's completed as requested." She held up her tablet, but Donovan didn't even glance at it. "Massachusetts General," he said instead, tapping the hospital name on the bill. "Good choice. Their trauma center is one of the best in the country." Rachel blinked in confusion. This was not the reaction she'd expected. "Yes. I didn't exactly choose it. The ambulance—" "And Dr. William Chen performed your surgeries," he continued, scanning the document. "He's excellent. Pioneered some innovative techniques in pelvic reconstruction. How do you know that?" The question slipped out before Rachel could stop herself. This conversation was veering in a direction she couldn't predict, and unpredictability was dangerous around Marcus Donovan. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "What's your out-of-pocket maximum, Ms. Morgan?" $15,000, she answered automatically, but with the deductible and the percentage split and some experimental treatments they wouldn't cover. She trailed off, unsure why she was discussing her financial predicament with the CEO who was likely about to fire her. Donovan nodded, seemingly unsurprised. "Our company health plan is inadequate. I've been saying this to the board for 2 years. He stood abruptly, walking to the window. "Did you know I lost my wife to cancer 7 years ago?" The sudden personal disclosure startled Rachel. Everyone knew Marcus Donovan was a widower, but he never spoke about it. It was as off-limits as discussing his childhood in foster care, another fact that circulated in whispered office gossip. "I'm very sorry," she managed, uncertain where this was heading. "Karen had excellent insurance, the best money could buy." His voice had a bitter edge, but when experimental treatments were her only hope, suddenly there were clauses and exclusions and denials. He turned to face her. "By the time I finished fighting with insurance companies, she was too weak for the treatment that might have saved her." Rachel sat perfectly still, the gravity of this confession washing over her. Marcus Donovan never shared personal details with employees, never showed vulnerability. Yet here he was, revealing his deepest wound to her, all because of an email mistake. "I didn't know," she said softly. "No one does." He returned to his desk and picked up the bill again. $47,000, that's what's standing between you and financial stability right now, isn't it? Despite your director-level salary. Rachel swallowed hard. "I've been working with the hospital on a payment plan. And that's why you've been taking on freelance analysis jobs at night. Why you've been the first one in and the last to leave every day since your return. Why you look exhausted all the time." His observations were delivered as statements, not questions. Heat crept up Rachel's neck. "You've been monitoring my work hours?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I make it my business to know everything about my top performers, Ms. Morgan, especially when they're pushing themselves to the breaking point." The intercom on his desk buzzed. Patricia's voice came through. "Your 10 o'clock is here, sir." "Tell them to wait," Donovan replied, without taking his eyes off Rachel. He reached for his phone, tapped the screen a few times, then set it down. "It's paid." Rachel stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what's paid?" "Your medical bill, all of it." The room seemed to tilt sideways. "Mr. Donovan, you can't. I don't understand." "Consider it an investment in your continued performance," he said, his tone shifting back to businesslike. "And motivation for you to help me overhaul our company's health benefits package. I want a proposal on my desk in 2 weeks. Something comprehensive that doesn't leave our people vulnerable when disaster strikes." Rachel struggled to process what was happening. "You want me to draft a new company-wide health insurance proposal? That's not my department. You're uniquely qualified now, wouldn't you say?" The intensity in his eyes hadn't diminished. "Sometimes the most valuable expertise comes from personal experience, Ms. Morgan." Rachel left Marcus Donovan's office in a daze, clutching her tablet to her chest like a shield. The quarterly report, the one she'd been so terrified about minutes earlier, remained unreviewed, unmentioned. Instead, her mind reeled with the impossible reality that her crushing medical debt had vanished with a few taps on the CEO's phone. "What happened in there?" Alicia whispered, as Rachel returned to her desk. Her friend's concerned eyes tracked Rachel's unsteady movements. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Later," Rachel murmured, sinking into her chair. How could she possibly explain what had just transpired? That Marcus Donovan, the man everyone feared, had just revealed a deeply personal tragedy, that he had paid off her medical bills without hesitation, that instead of firing her for incompetence, he'd given her a special assignment that could impact every employee at Pinnacle. She opened her email, half expecting to find that she'd imagined the whole encounter. Instead, there was a new message from the hospital's billing department, confirming that her account balance was now 0. It was real. All of it. Her phone buzzed with a text from her brother, Jason. "Hospital just called. Said my payment info wasn't needed anymore. What's going on, Rach?" She'd listed Jason as her emergency contact and secondary responsible party on all her medical forms. He'd been her rock through everything, driving her to physical therapy appointments, helping her move to a ground-floor apartment when stairs became impossible, even offering to take a second mortgage on his house to help with her bills, despite having 2 kids in college. "Long story, call you tonight," she texted back, knowing she needed time to process before attempting an explanation. Throughout the day, Rachel found herself glancing toward the executive floor, wondering about the enigmatic man who'd just altered the course of her life. In 7 years at Pinnacle, she'd rarely interacted with Marcus Donovan beyond quarterly presentations and the occasional company event. He had always been a distant figure, brilliant but cold, demanding but fair. The glimpse of personal pain she'd witnessed today contradicted everything she thought she knew about him. By 5 o'clock, most of her colleagues had left, but Rachel remained at her desk staring at a blank document titled Health Benefits Proposal. Where would she even begin? She was a financial analyst, not an insurance expert, yet failing wasn't an option, not after what Donovan had done for her. Still here, I see. Rachel startled at the voice. Marcus Donovan stood beside her cubicle, his suit jacket now absent, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. It was jarring to see him on the main floor. Executives rarely ventured beyond their lofty perch. Mr. Donovan, yes, I'm just getting started on that proposal. She gestured awkwardly at her screen. Walk with me, he said, already turning toward the elevators. It wasn't a request. Minutes later, they were in the company parking garage, approaching a sleek black Tesla. Get in, he said, unlocking the doors. There's someone you should meet. Rachel hesitated. Getting into the CEO's car after hours wasn't just unusual, it was potentially inappropriate. As if reading her thoughts, Donovan added, Patricia is meeting us there. This is strictly professional, Ms. Morgan. The drive was mostly silent. Donovan navigated Boston's evening traffic with the same focused efficiency he brought to business meetings. Rachel watched his profile, trying to reconcile the ruthless executive with the man who had shared his wife's story, who had eliminated her debt with a gesture that felt almost compassionate. Why did you do it? She finally asked. Pay my bill. You could have just reprimanded me for the email mistake and moved on. His eyes remained on the road. Would you prefer I hadn't? No. I'm incredibly grateful. I just don't understand. Donovan was quiet so long she thought he might not answer. Then, I recognize something in you, Miss Morgan. The same determination Karen had. She worked through chemo, insisted on normalcy, even when she was in pain. His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. You've been doing the same. Coming to work despite everything, never asking for help or special treatment. That's just being responsible, Rachel said, uncomfortable with the comparison. It's exceptional, he countered. And I reward exceptional. They pulled up to an imposing brownstone in Beacon Hill. Patricia was already waiting on the steps, tablet in hand. She nodded curtly as they approached. Ms. Morgan, welcome to the Donovan Foundation, Marcus said as he unlocked the door. Inside was not the lavish home Rachel had expected, but a functional office space. The walls were covered with framed medical research papers, photographs of hospital wings, and charts tracking funding allocations. A large portrait dominated one wall, a beautiful woman with warm eyes and a subtle smile. Karen Donovan. My wife's cancer was rare, Marcus explained, following Rachel's gaze. After her diagnosis, we discovered how little research funding it received. After her death, I established this foundation to change that. Patricia stepped forward. The foundation funds medical research, provides patient advocacy, and helps individuals who fall through the cracks of our healthcare system. Her tone was softer than at the office. Mr. Donovan personally reviews each case we take on. Rachel turned to him in surprise. You regularly pay people's medical bills? When necessary, he said, but it's a stopgap solution. The system itself needs to change. He motioned them toward a conference room, which is why I brought you here. Inside, a whiteboard was covered with notes about insurance plans, coverage gaps, and legislative challenges. Patricia handed Rachel a thick binder. Our research on corporate healthcare options, everything we've compiled over the last 5 years. You've been working on this for 5 years, Rachel asked, flipping through the meticulously organized data. And making little headway with the board, Marcus admitted, frustration evident in his voice. They see improved healthcare as an unnecessary expense. But it's an investment in employee retention and productivity, Rachel countered automatically. The cost of replacing talented staff far exceeds the price of better coverage. Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. Exactly, but I need data that speaks their language. Cost-benefit analyses, projected ROI, that's where you come in. Because I'm both a financial analyst and a patient, Rachel realized aloud. Yes, you understand both sides in a way few people do. For the next 2 hours, they outlined the framework for a proposal that would transform Pinnacle's approach to employee healthcare. Rachel found herself surprised by how easily she worked with Donovan in this setting. Away from the corporate hierarchy, he was still intense but more approachable. He listened to her ideas, challenged her assumptions, and built upon her suggestions with insights from his foundation's work. As they wrapped up, Rachel's curiosity got the better of her. Can I ask you something personal? He tensed slightly but nodded. Everyone at Pinnacle sees you as intimidating. Distant. Why show me this side of you? Why trust me with something so important to you? Marcus was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. My reputation serves a purpose at Pinnacle. It's easier to make hard decisions when people keep their distance. He looked at Karen's portrait. But this foundation, this is my real legacy. And sometimes you need the right person to help build a legacy. And you think I'm that person? Rachel asked, incredulous. I know you are. Your financial models are consistently the most thorough in the company. You're respected by your peers despite your youth. And now you have something more valuable than your MBA. You have perspective. Patricia cleared her throat. It's getting late, sir. You have that conference call with Tokyo at 5 a.m. The spell broke. They were once again CEO and employee, the brief glimpse into his private world fading as they returned to the car. The ride back to Pinnacle was quiet, but not uncomfortable. When they arrived, Rachel gathered her courage. Thank you, she said, not just for the bill, for trusting me with this project. Marcus nodded, his expression once again unreadable. I expect a preliminary draft by Monday. We'll review it at the foundation. I'll have it ready, Rachel promised, stepping out of the car. And Miss Morgan? He called as she turned to leave. No one at Pinnacle needs to know about our arrangement or the foundation's involvement. Understood? The distance was back, the clear delineation between them. Of course, Mr. Donovan. As she watched his car pull away, Rachel felt both exhilarated and unsettled. Today had altered the trajectory of her life in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. Marcus Donovan had removed her greatest burden, but in its place had left something equally weighty, his trust. And something told her that disappointing him would be far costlier than any medical bill. She pulled out her phone to call her brother, wondering how she could possibly explain that her boss had paid her medical bills without revealing the complexity of what had just transpired, or the strange new connection she felt to the most feared man at Pinnacle Investments. 3 weeks into the healthcare project, Rachel had fallen into an unexpected rhythm. By day, she maintained her regular duties at Pinnacle, analyzing investment opportunities and preparing reports for various departments. By night, she worked at the Donovan Foundation, diving deep into healthcare policies and insurance models alongside Marcus and a small team of dedicated specialists who operated under strict confidentiality agreements. The dual life was exhausting, but exhilarating. Rachel had never felt more intellectually challenged or more purposeful in her work. Each evening, as the brownstone's lights burned late into the night, she witnessed a different side of Marcus Donovan, still demanding and meticulous, but also passionate and surprisingly collaborative when it came to the Foundation's mission. You look different, Alicia commented one morning as they waited for the elevator. More alive somehow. Rachel adjusted her grip on her coffee cup, avoiding her friend's perceptive gaze. Just sleeping better now that the medical bills are resolved. The lie came easily, though it tasted bitter. She hated keeping secrets from Alicia, who had been her closest ally at Pinnacle for years. And that's all it is? Alicia pressed, lowering her voice. Because there are whispers, you know, about you and Donovan. Rachel nearly choked on her coffee. What? That's ridiculous. Is it? You get called to his office for what should have been a disaster, and instead of being reprimanded, you come out looking shell-shocked but happy. Then you start putting in crazy hours on some mysterious project, and twice now his car has been spotted dropping you off in the morning. Alicia raised an eyebrow. People notice things, Rachel. It's not what you think, Rachel insisted, heat creeping into her cheeks. It's a special financial analysis project. Confidential. That's all. Alicia looked unconvinced, but was prevented from further questioning by the arrival of the elevator. As they stepped inside, Rachel caught sight of Patricia across the lobby, watching them with that inscrutable expression she'd come to know well. Had she overheard? Would she report this conversation to Marcus? The thought made Rachel uneasy. Marcus had been clear about keeping the Foundation's involvement secret. If rumors were already circulating about their connection, how long before someone started digging deeper? That evening at the Foundation, Rachel found it difficult to concentrate. The conversation with Alicia had unsettled her more than she wanted to admit, not just because of the rumors, but because they had forced her to confront her own confused feelings about Marcus Donovan. He was her boss, a man 20 years her senior, with far more power and wealth than she could imagine. Yet in these evening sessions as they worked side by side, something had shifted. She'd come to admire his brilliance, his dry wit, his unwavering commitment to changing a system that had failed his wife. "You're distracted tonight," Marcus observed, as they reviewed coverage options for chronic conditions. The Foundation office was empty except for them, Patricia having left hours earlier. Rachel hesitated, then decided on honesty. "People at Pinnacle are talking. About us." Marcus's expression didn't change, but she saw his shoulders tense slightly. What exactly are they saying? That there's something between us. Beyond professional. The words hung awkwardly in the air. Obviously it's nonsense, but is it? He interrupted, his piercing gaze finding hers. Rachel's breath caught. What do you mean? Marcus set down the document he'd been reviewing and leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. I think we both know this partnership has evolved beyond what either of us anticipated. Before Rachel could formulate a response, Marcus's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, frowning. I need to take this. It's the board chairman. He stood and moved to the other room, leaving Rachel frozen in place, her mind racing with the implications of what he'd just said. The partnership has evolved. What exactly did that mean? And more importantly, what did she want it to mean? Rachel gathered her composure and returned to the healthcare data, but the numbers swam before her eyes. She was still staring blankly at the page when Marcus returned 10 minutes later, his expression grim. There's a problem, he said without preamble. The board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. Apparently, someone has raised concerns about my personal interest in your career advancement. Rachel's stomach dropped. What? Who would? James Westfield, CFO. Marcus's jaw tightened. He's never approved of my management style. Too soft on employees, in his opinion. But there's nothing inappropriate happening, Rachel protested, even as her conscience prickled at the half-truth. Nothing physical had happened, true, but there was something undeniably charged in their interactions lately. Westfield claims to have evidence that I paid your personal medical expenses, Marcus continued, his voice carefully controlled. He's suggesting it constitutes a gross misuse of company resources and potentially creates a hostile work environment for other employees. Rachel felt the blood drain from her face. But you didn't use company money. It was your personal funds through the foundation, right? Marcus's silence was answer enough. Rachel stared at him in horror. You used Pinnacle funds. Not directly, he finally said, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. I authorized an emergency employee wellness grant. It's a discretionary fund that executives can access for special circumstances. Completely legal, but it looks terrible, Rachel finished, especially if Westfield is suggesting there's more between us than a professional relationship. She felt sick. Marcus, this could ruin your reputation. The foundation's work. Everything. It was the first time she'd used his first name. Neither of them acknowledged it. My reputation isn't what concerns me, he said quietly. It's the healthcare proposal. If Westfield succeeds in undermining my position, the board will never approve the changes we've been working toward. Then we need to present the proposal before the emergency meeting, Rachel said, her analytical mind kicking into high gear. Move up the timeline. Show them the financial benefits are so substantial that any personal connections are irrelevant. Marcus shook his head. It's not ready. We need at least another 2 weeks to finalize the projections and implementation strategy. Then I'll resign, Rachel said impulsively. If I'm not at Pinnacle anymore, there can't be a conflict of interest. You can distance yourself from me, tell the board it was a one-time decision you now regret, and— Absolutely not. His voice was sharp. I won't let you sacrifice your career for this. Then what's the alternative? Marcus was silent for a long moment. There is one option, he finally said, but you're not going to like it. The next morning, Rachel entered Pinnacle's executive boardroom, feeling as though she might be sick. She'd barely slept, turning over Marcus's proposed solution in her mind until dawn. It was brilliant in its simplicity and devastating in its implications. The boardroom fell silent as she took her seat at the far end of the table. 14 pairs of eyes tracked her movements, 13 board members, and Marcus himself, who sat at the head of the table, his expression inscrutable. James Westfield, a hawk-faced man in his 50s, watched her with thinly veiled contempt from Marcus's right. Ms. Morgan, Westfield drawled, how good of you to join us. I was just explaining to the board about your special arrangement with our CEO. Rachel forced herself to meet his gaze steadily. There's no special arrangement, Mr. Westfield. No, he slid a folder across the table. Then perhaps you can explain why Mr. Donovan authorized a $47,000 payment to Massachusetts General Hospital on your behalf last month. A payment that coincidentally matches your outstanding medical bills to the penny. Murmurs rippled around the table. Rachel glanced at Marcus, who gave her an almost imperceptible nod. He didn't, Rachel said clearly, opening the folder. Inside was a copy of her hospital bill with Pinnacle's payment authorization. I paid my own medical bills. Westfield's smug expression faltered. "Excuse me?" "The payment came from me," she continued, heart pounding but voice steady. "I used a personal loan that Mr. Donovan helped arrange through his contacts at First Boston Financial. He knew about my situation because I accidentally sent him my medical bill instead of a quarterly report. He offered to connect me with a banker who could provide better terms than I was finding on my own. Nothing more." She slid another document across the table, a loan agreement prepared by the Foundation's lawyers overnight, backdated and bearing her signature. It was technically fraud, Marcus had acknowledged, but a necessary deception to protect the greater good. Rachel had signed it with trembling fingers at 3 a.m., feeling like she was crossing a line she could never uncross. Westfield examined the document, frowning. "This doesn't explain the company payment authorization. An administrative error," Marcus spoke for the first time, his voice calm. "My assistant was supposed to forward Ms. Morgan's loan information to the bank. She mistakenly processed it as an employee wellness grant. When the error was discovered, it was immediately corrected." He nodded to Patricia, who distributed documents showing the reversal of the company payment and confirmation of a wire transfer from Rachel's personal account. More forged paperwork, created overnight by the Foundation's financial team. Rachel felt a weight in her chest, knowing how many ethical boundaries they were crossing, all to protect a healthcare proposal that could help thousands of employees. "I find that hard to believe," Westfield persisted, though uncertainty had crept into his voice. "Believe what you will, James," Marcus replied coolly. "The documentation is clear. Now, unless you have actual evidence of impropriety rather than office gossip and misinterpreted financial records, I suggest we move on to actual company business." The chairman cleared his throat. "I think we've seen enough to dismiss these concerns, James, though I would advise more caution in future, Marcus. Even the appearance of favoritism can damage morale." Marcus nodded solemnly. "Point taken, Chairman. In fact, I've been reconsidering our company's approach to employee well-being altogether." He pressed a button, and the boardroom screen lit up with the first slide of their healthcare proposal. The proposal that wasn't supposed to be ready for 2 more weeks. Rachel stared in shock as Marcus began presenting their work, seamlessly walking the board through the financial model she'd created, the cost projections they'd spent weeks refining. He'd completed it somehow, working through the night after she'd left. "As you can see," he concluded 40 minutes later, "implementing this new healthcare approach would not only address the inadequacies of our current plan, but would result in projected savings of $3 million over 5 years through reduced turnover and increased productivity." The boardroom was silent as the directors absorbed the comprehensive presentation. Then the chairman spoke. "This is impressive work, Marcus, but the timing seems suspicious given today's allegations." "The timing is not coincidental," Marcus admitted. "Ms. Morgan's situation highlighted the failures in our current system. It prompted me to accelerate the review I've been advocating for years. But the data speaks for itself, regardless of what catalyzed its collection." More discussion followed, but Rachel barely heard it. She felt hollowed out, caught between admiration for Marcus's strategic brilliance and horror at how easily they had fabricated evidence and lied to the board. Even if it was for a greater good, where was the line? And once crossed, could they ever truly go back? As the meeting adjourned, Marcus caught her eye across the table and gave her a small, private smile of victory. The healthcare proposal would move forward to final approval. Their deception had worked, but at what cost, Rachel wondered as she gathered her papers. And why did the triumph feel so much like loss? 2 days after the board meeting, Rachel sat alone in her apartment, staring at the loan agreement spread across her coffee table. The document looked authentic, high-quality paper, official letterhead, legitimate terms and conditions, a perfect forgery. Her signature at the bottom seemed to mock her, a permanent record of her compromise. The board had voted yesterday to approve the new healthcare plan. Starting next quarter, every Pinnacle employee would have access to significantly improved coverage, lower deductibles, better prescription benefits, expanded mental health services, and crucially, coverage for experimental treatments that could mean the difference between life and death for someone facing a serious illness. Thousands of people would benefit, including future accident victims like herself. So why did victory taste so bitter? Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Foundation. 8 p.m., important discussion. Rachel hadn't spoken to him since the board meeting. She'd called in sick yesterday, needing space to process everything that had happened, the lies, the forged documents, the way they had manipulated the system to achieve their goal, and beneath it all the undercurrents between them that neither had fully acknowledged. She texted back a simple, "Okay," and began getting ready, unsure what to expect. When she arrived at the brownstone, she was surprised to find it dark except for a single light in Marcus's private office at the back. She knocked softly before entering. Marcus sat behind his desk, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, looking more tired than she'd ever seen him. The usual intensity in his eyes had dimmed, replaced by something that looked almost like resignation. "You came," he said, as if he'd been uncertain she would. "You said it was important." Rachel remained standing, maintaining a deliberate distance. "It is." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Please, sit." Rachel complied, her posture stiff. "Is this about the healthcare plan? In a way." Marcus leaned forward, hands clasped on the desk between them. "The chairman called me this afternoon. He's been reviewing our proposal in more detail and had some additional questions about the implementation timeline." "That's standard procedure," Rachel said, not understanding his somber tone. "Yes, but in the process he mentioned something troubling." Marcus paused, watching her closely. "He asked if you would be managing the rollout, given your personal investment in the project." Rachel frowned. "I thought we addressed those rumors." "We did. This wasn't about the loan or any impropriety. It was about your accident." Understanding dawned. "He knows I sent you my medical bill." "That I was the inspiration for the policy change." Marcus nodded. Apparently, Patricia let it slip during a follow-up conversation, an innocent comment about how your situation had highlighted the gaps in our coverage. "Is that a problem?" "It's the truth, after all." One of the few truths in this tangled web they'd woven, not inherently, but it led the chairman to request your complete personnel file, including your medical leave documentation. Rachel felt a chill. And your accident date doesn't align with the loan date on our forged agreement." Marcus's voice was quiet but clear. "If he looks deeper, if anyone compares timestamps, our entire story falls apart." The room seemed to close in around her. "So, what are you saying?" "I'm saying we're at a crossroads." Marcus stood and walked to the window, silhouetted against the city lights. "I've spent my career building Pinnacle, and the last 7 years building this foundation. Both have been in service to one goal, changing a healthcare system that failed my wife when she needed it most." He turned to face her. "But in pursuit of that goal, I've compromised principles I once held sacred. I've justified increasingly questionable decisions, and now I've involved you in my ethical slide." Rachel felt a surge of unexpected anger. "I made my own choices, Marcus. You didn't force me to sign that document, didn't I?" He challenged softly. "With the weight of my position, my authority, the debt you felt after I paid your bill." The accusation stung because it held a kernel of truth. Rachel stood, needing to be on equal footing. "So what happens now? The chairman discovers our deception. The healthcare plan gets scrapped and we both lose our jobs. Was it all for nothing?" Marcus shook his head. "Not necessarily. I've been considering alternatives all day." He returned to his desk and opened a folder. "Option 1, we get ahead of this. I go to the chairman tomorrow, confess everything and offer my resignation. I take full responsibility, make it clear you were acting under my direction, and the healthcare plan proceeds as approved." "That's not acceptable," Rachel said immediately. "I won't let you fall on your sword alone." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I expected you'd say that. Which brings us to option 2. We correct our mistake, legally this time." He slid a check across the desk. A personal check from his account made out to Rachel for $47,000. "I pay your medical bills openly, as a gift, not a loan. We disclose our personal relationship to HR, recuse ourselves from direct reporting conflicts, and accept whatever consequences come. No more lies." Rachel stared at the check, then back at him. "Our personal relationship? Rachel." The way he said her name sent a current through her body. "We can keep pretending there's nothing between us beyond professional respect, or we can be honest, at least with ourselves." She felt dizzy with the implications. The board would never allow it. The CEO and a director. "I'm prepared to step down as CEO if necessary," he said simply. "The foundation has always been my true passion anyway." The magnitude of what he was offering struck her. Marcus Donovan, walking away from the company he'd built, the power he'd accumulated, all for principle. And perhaps for her. "There's a third option," Rachel said, surprising herself. "One you haven't considered." Marcus raised an eyebrow, waiting. "We tell the truth about the medical bill. You did pay it personally, not as a loan, but as the first case of a new Pinnacle Emergency Medical Fund." She moved closer, energized by the idea forming. We create a legitimate company foundation, funded partially by Pinnacle and partially by executive contributions, specifically designed to help employees with catastrophic medical expenses that exceed their coverage. The board would never approve using company funds that way, Marcus objected. They would if it came with significant tax advantages and positive PR, Rachel countered. We position it as corporate social responsibility, tie it to recruitment and retention metrics, and make it part of the company's brand. Marcus considered this, his strategic mind visibly assessing the angles. It could work, but it doesn't address the falsified loan documents. We destroy them, Rachel said firmly. Tell the chairman the truth, that in a moment of panic, facing rumors about impropriety, we created a cover story that seemed simpler than the truth. We apologize for the deception and present the foundation as a better, transparent solution. He could still fire us both. He could, Rachel acknowledged. But would that serve Pinnacle's interests, losing both of us and the institutional knowledge we carry? Risking negative publicity if the reason for our departure leaked? She shook her head. The chairman is a businessman first. He'll recognize the value of our proposal. Marcus studied her with renewed intensity, a spark reigniting in his eyes. When did you become so strategic, Ms. Morgan? I've had an excellent teacher, she replied with a small smile. Marcus circled the desk until he stood directly before her, close enough that she could detect the faint scent of his cologne. And what about us? Does your third option address that complication? Rachel's heart pounded, but she held his gaze. That depends on what you want, Marcus. You know what I want, he said quietly. I've wanted it since the day you walked into my office with that medical bill and refused to make excuses for your mistake. You showed more integrity in that moment of vulnerability than most people demonstrate in a lifetime. Ironic, considering how many ethical lines we've crossed since then, Rachel observed. Perhaps, or maybe it took crossing those lines to recognize what matters most. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. I don't want to be your boss anymore, Rachel. I want to be your partner. At the foundation, at Pinnacle if they'll have us, and he hesitated, then finished. In life, if you'll consider it. The directness of his declaration took her breath away. This was Marcus Donovan, a man who never wavered once his mind was made up. You barely know me, she protested weakly. I know enough, he countered. I know how you think, how you work, how you face adversity. I know your values even when they're tested. The rest we can discover together, without the complications of our current positions. Rachel looked down at their joined hands, then back at his face. No longer the intimidating CEO, but a man standing at a crossroads, offering her a path forward neither of them had anticipated. Yes, she said simply. 6 months later, Rachel stood at the podium in Massachusetts General Hospital's newly renovated trauma center, a ribbon-cutting ceremony underway. Behind her sat the hospital board, Pinnacle executives including a tight-lipped but resigned James Westfield, and front and center Marcus Donovan, no longer Pinnacle's CEO but the full-time president of the newly established Pinnacle Donovan Foundation. When I was brought to this trauma center last year after a near-fatal accident, I couldn't have imagined standing here today, Rachel began, addressing the assembled crowd and press. I was focused on survival, then recovery, then the crushing weight of medical bills that threatened to undo all the progress I'd made. She gestured to the plaque beside her, which bore both the Pinnacle and Donovan Foundation logos. This new emergency care fund will ensure that no patient faces that same financial burden after receiving life-saving treatment here. It represents the first of many partnerships between medical providers and the corporate world, a model we hope to replicate nationwide. What she didn't say was how close they'd come to losing everything. The chairman had been predictably furious when they confessed their deception, but ultimately pragmatic. Marcus had offered his resignation as CEO but would remain on the board. Rachel had been demoted from director to senior analyst, but retained her position at Pinnacle while also taking on a leadership role at the foundation. Their relationship had been disclosed, documented, and subject to more gossip than either cared to acknowledge. But as the months passed, the talk had died down, replaced by genuine interest in the innovative healthcare initiative they were pioneering. I'd like to recognize the man whose vision made this possible, Rachel continued, meeting Marcus's eyes across the room. A man who experienced personal tragedy and transformed it into purpose, who recognized that sometimes the most valuable expertise comes from personal experience. Marcus smiled at the callback to their first meaningful conversation, rising to join her at the podium as applause filled the room. Later, as they left the hospital hand in hand, Rachel paused to look back at the building where her life had been saved twice. First by the skilled medical team, and then by an email mistake that had changed everything. "No regrets?" Marcus asked, following her gaze. Rachel squeezed his hand. "About the accident?" "Many." "About sending that medical bill to my CEO?" She smiled up at him. "Best mistake I ever made," Marcus laughed, a sound that had once been rare but now came easily and often. "The bill is paid, Ms. Morgan," he said, echoing his words from that fateful day, in more ways than one. As they walked toward their future together, Rachel reflected on how a single moment of carelessness had led to this unexpected path, one with challenges and compromises certainly, but also with purpose and love, and the satisfaction of creating meaningful change. Sometimes, she thought, the most profound journeys begin with a simple mistake and 3 surprising words: "It's paid."